Flanagan, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Brick by Brick. I'm your host, Brad Critchfield, and I have an amazing guest for you today. Say hello to Hannah Flanagan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thanks for your patience. I think we're getting started a little bit late, a couple minutes, but...
Why you got to throw it in there? I told
you know what?
I did my best, okay? No, yeah, a little late,
Sorry, you know.
No, it's... my power went out last night. I have a bunch of excuses I can give you, but it really did, though.
Hey, there's a difference between an excuse and a reason.
That's true. That's true. So we have a lot to talk about, and we also have some questions that came in too. Just stuff about education and school board, because I think you know a thing or two about school board and education and obviously Bellflower Unified School District. We'll talk a little bit about that. Great. And full disclosure, I'm running for school board seat. So if my take on things seems a little biased, it's But a lot of things I want to talk about, and one of the things I really enjoy about being in just campaigning and really getting involved in a lot of the conversations that are happening right now is I get to talk to people like you, people that have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about the district, what works, what doesn't work, how we can be better. And I think that's very important to have those conversations and have those relationships where you can really build upon those experiences in the past, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a great starting point for maybe just telling everybody a little bit about your experience, actually how you even got on the board in the first place.
Well, it was a long journey, I guess I can say, and an interesting one. I moved to Bellflower in 2003 with my then 3-year-old child. And I could see on the horizon we needed to pick an elementary school. And in looking around, I was shocked to discover that, private elementary schools actually had waiting lists. And there was this competitive field for people as young as 3 years old. And I'm like, wow, this is astounding. So I knew that I was going to go the public education route. I just felt like that was just a better place to go. So I started looking, as a young parent without much experience with, from the parent perspective of vetting a public education system. Mm-hmm. I started looking around, and I was really intrigued by the Intensive Learning Center, which at the time had an extended day program, these specialists, all these other things. So I kind of set my sights on that and committed to staying within the district boundaries of Bellflower so that my child could attend there. And when my kid was at the time, it was very competitive to get into ILC. Some of the families that are there now might not know, but it used to actually operate on there was a lottery type of system. There were so many people trying to get in. So we just waited with bated breath to see if we were one of those. And then we were, oh, it's great. It's amazing. And they had at the time what they called a kindergarten extended year program, or the KEY program. So the summer before kindergarten started, they brought the kids in, they acclimated them to the campus, they showed them how to, where the bathrooms were, all these little things that really can scare a kindergartner and or their parents. So that was my first introduction to BUSD. And I really appreciated that experience. I thought that was so smart, remove a lot of these first day of school anxieties for kindergartners. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like my students started prepared. But as soon as school started, there was an immediate need for volunteer help. And so at the time I had my 9-month-old son, Septon. Alyssa had just started this class, and the teacher was like, are there any parents who can help? And I was like, sure. My career had just been placed on hold as I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. And I'd even come to the classroom sometimes and really saw that as much as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. There are teachers in classrooms with a bunch of little tiny kids, and they're trying to be kind of that village for several hours a day. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't seem right. This teacher needs help. Even the most capable person having a classroom of, 20, 25 5-year-olds is quite an ask. So I just loved being able to kind of alleviate, I felt, maybe some of that stress and some of that load. And and it quickly became something that was more than about just my child. So that's kind of how I started volunteering. I went on a path of volunteerism very eagerly. I make fun of myself now because when the letters came home for PTA to ask, you know, do you want to volunteer for PTA? I said, sure. And here's my resume. Because I really thought it was, you know, I just had to prove that I am capable, I'm qualified. That turned out to not be the case. I think if you have a heartbeat and willing hands, you're in. So, are we good?
We're good.
Okay. All right. So
we're live.
We're live. We're live. Love it live.
That's one of the best things about doing live.
Anyway, so that long story short ended up, you know, in this volunteer position and then that volunteer position. And then in 2009 was asked to be the PTA president. And I was like, oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
No way. What do you have to do? And they said, well, you just go to a meeting once a month.
Yeah, that's what they always say.
Sounded right.
That's what they always say.
It's, you know. So it went from that. Then I, you know, was like a Meet the Masters art coordinator at the ILC. Got the opportunity to work directly teaching art classes. Which, by the way, I'm not an artist, but there's a formulation for, like, you know, we can teach you how to teach the kids these simple art lessons, and I thought it was amazing. And then that led to, you know, there's council PTA that I was on in various capacities for several years, and then ended up going to Sacramento on behalf of the district. To advocate for special education funding for the district.
Tell me more about that.
Okay.
What does that look like when, and I have a little experience when it comes to the Chamber of Commerce, and there is some stuff that we advocate for when it comes to bigger stuff in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. Not too much lately, but when you're advocating for children and for kids with special needs, what does that trip look like? What are you doing?
So it was part of an organized day of parent advocates. So that were grouped together and all flown to Sacramento. So these are parents from several different districts. I was the parent representative asked to go on behalf of Bellflower Unified. So on my trip, you know, I flew with a parent from Lakewood Unified and with a parent from somewhere else. I was the only parent that didn't have a student that was receiving special education services in the district. I went from the perspective of having been in several board meetings where it was a constant complaint of the board that increasingly students needed more and more special education services.
What do you mean by that? The complaint? How?
Well, I guess it was said at a board meeting, like, if your student needs services that the district doesn't provide, for example, the district is required to provide them for you.
Correct. Yeah.
But if you don't offer those services here, your district has to pay for you to get them from somewhere else.
Right.
Now, initially, when it became an obligation for school districts to provide these services, according to, you know, federal law, the federal government said, we'll reimburse you the certain percent, you know.
Okay.
Now, this was at a time when the diagnosis for certain special needs hadn't come out. This is before we had learned what autism was or ADHD.
Right. And some kids, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
You know, that's something that is, you know, with my daughter, and you met her briefly, you know, she has special needs, but she doesn't have a thing you could point your finger at and say, oh, she has this. It's complication due to her when she was born with cancer, and it's complications due to the treatment of. So it's we don't really have like a name that she has that they tried to, like, when she has ataxia, which is like a small part of it, or oral aversion and things like that. But I know what you're saying. It's sometimes it's not as clear cut as like, these kids have this, these kids have this. There's a huge spectrum.
Like, even if you don't have a name for what the child has, you know what services they need. After you go through certain assessments, right? So those services, they come at a cost, right? And the federal government says, school districts, it's on you to make sure that these students have these services available to them. And, you know, again, there's not really one district out there that I know of that can provide every single service under the sun. So if you have what's called a special education local plan area, which is a certain regional area that amongst this regional area, most of your services are going to be covered, right? And so districts kind of collectively go in on this thing. So it was the SELPA that had organized this trip.
SELPA.
The SELPA, Special Education Local Plan Area.
Okay.
So I went knowing that special services were critically underfunded by the federal government and not reimbursed to school districts to the extent that, and the reason I knew that is by going to these school board meetings where they would say, this is horrible because all this is coming out of our general fund. All the stuff that we're not getting reimbursed from the federal government by is coming out of our general fund. And that's affecting education for everybody because now we have less money for the programs for general, for students who are all students, right?
Right.
So I researched the issue, from outside of the Bellflower thing. And sure enough, I find out all this information, like here's the cost to most districts. Here's what the federal government pays for. So that difference that's coming, So I went with that in mind, to basically press on legislators, to press the federal government to adequately fund special education to the extent that they had promised when they made those requirements of districts.
Okay.
And I made these visual aids and everything. I didn't know what the day was going to look like when I went.
Did you bring like an easel?
Well, close. So I brought a folder
Yeah.
and I had printed these little visuals that I had made, and I made like a classroom of kids. And I was like, okay, this represents the need. Mm-hmm. This shaded part is how much the federal government's actually paying, and legislators,
yeah.
There's that. Because I find that helps people. And I also took a 3-legged stool and I said, look, you've got mandates, the mandate to provide these services. Mm-hmm. You've got measurements that you impose on districts to ensure that you're providing them adequately. And then you have the means to do these things. Guess what's missing? The means. There's not the funding there. So what it ended up looking like is we had a charted path through the hallways of the Capitol to hit certain legislators that represented our area.
And you schedule these meetings beforehand?
No.
Okay.
You kind of bomb in.
Okay.
But here's what some fascinating things that I learned on that trip is that on any given day, and I've since been to Sacramento in other capacities, but what I found so amazing is that on any given day, there are all kinds of interest groups snaking in and out of those offices. Yeah. I saw people with real estate badges on. Mm-hmm. I saw people from oil companies. I saw people from construction companies. I saw people from, all these different things. And I thought, who's out there for our kids?
Right.
Who?
You.
Yep.
Right.
And that's when I realized it's us.
Yeah.
It's parents. It's PTA. PTA is the largest child advocacy organization in the nation. And I'll tell you, when I learned that that's what they are, they're not people that are trying to, sell cookies to raise money for t-shirts, that they're an advocacy organization and they have 2 full-time lobbyists in Sacramento who are following legislation, who are fighting for legislation for our kids. It was a paradigm shift for me.
Yeah.
And I recognized that, wow, all this stuff we've been doing, these events and these barbecues, yes, they're great for parent engagement, but there's such a larger picture out there. We're the voices. Yeah. We're the voices for those forgotten kids.
How long has it been since you were involved in the Bellflower PTA?
I think I left Council PTA in 2014.
Okay. What does membership look like?
Membership look like in Council PTA or in PTA in general?
PTA in our district.
I would say it's different at different sites. And again, this is me with 6-year-old data.
Right, right.
But a lot of people are members and they don't know the power of their membership, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's one thing, PTAs usually include like a little envelope in your back to school packet, right? Yeah. And a lot of parents are busy and they get it and they just fill stuff out and they stick money in and they send it to their kids and that, and it's done. And so you're going to get some automatic members that way. But you really have to make the push and you have to help parents make the connection to what you are and what you're doing, right, and why it's important. And I know when I was there, I saw some really creative and interesting ways that parents were trying to or that the PTA was trying to get those parents pulled in. And
like what works?
Well, I'm going to embarrass my friend Yolanda Melendez.
Do it.
Yolanda, if you're watching. So
She is.
we
She just commented.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
So I'm getting ready to do it. It's on YouTube. Okay, so this is
Yeah, it's serious. It's serious.
they had a meet the PTA night and they just had a little bit of fun. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so they have a packed auditorium. Yolanda comes out dressed like Lady Gaga, sings a parody to Poker
She
Face.
said, "Oh no," by the way.
You know, if you want to find it, just Google. No, so she's got the other PTA ladies behind her, and they're doing this coordinated dance.
Uh-huh.
And you know, the song is like, instead of my poker face,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
my PTA.
Oh, okay.
It was a
It went
full.
there.
It went there.
Okay.
It went there. Now, Yolanda, I don't know if I should tell them about my part in that, but I'm not gonna right now.
I think you should. I think you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't like cameras.
Oh, well, you
Okay.
came to the wrong place.
I know. There's a lot of them here.
There's probably 9 pointed at you right now.
So what I did, I'm like, I can't get up on stage. I can't be in the spotlight with you,
Uh-huh.
but I'll let you have my voice. Okay.
Okay.
So I was the Lady Gaga voice
Okay.
that Yolanda lip sync to.
Okay.
And I'll tell
I can
you.
dig it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was a bit of a stretch. You know, I wrote the lyrics.
Yeah.
And I can't take credit for this idea. I
Okay.
saw it. Some other PTA did it. And in fact, after Yolanda posted the video, they gave us a shout out in the comments. They're like, wow, good. You know, we love
Yeah.
it, you know? Anyway, so they did this whole thing. I mean, we're talking about coordinated dance. I think my favorite line was like, what was it about something about we cut 1,000,000 box tops and we count them one by one, and Yolanda goes like this and just rains box tops,
Okay.
you know, on the stage. And so, you know, everyone's loving it, because I think what the grander picture there is, and I'm going to throw another shout out to Lisa Heapy from Lindstrom, because she brought these words to me, which is we are the they you've been
Yeah.
waiting for.
Oh, I like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful when Lisa gave this inspirational message one time at a PTA meeting. Because as a parent, you go to school and you're like, they,
Yeah.
they, and you realize that they is us,
Right.
right? And so there are two sides to that. Like sometimes when you're in the PTA, it can look very cliquish, right? And people are like, oh, they're all friends.
Everything's
and
cliquish, though.
I tried.
You know.
Yes, I will say when I was trying to get involved, and I had my little stroller with my kid, and I was directed to the PTA room, right?
Yeah.
Secretary, the PTA's in room 16, and I go up there pulling my stroller, so eager to help.
Yeah.
And there was a big sign right there that said PTA only beyond this point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a member. Do I have to show my card? You know,
Yeah.
it's just like
it's like
this.
Costco. You're just like, oh, like,
You know, and so it was just part of a culture of like this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
we're the PTA. You know, and I don't know if you've seen, there's some kids movie out there. It's like, my mom is the PTA president and she'll make your life hell, you know,
I can
as if
imagine.
you have that
Yeah.
power, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, whenever I did step into the role as president, the first thing I did is like, no, we need to make parents know that we want to reach out and pull them in whatever capacity they can be in.
Mhm.
And that's where you start to learn like that every parent has a right to be involved.
Yeah.
But exercising those rights definitely comes from a place of privilege.
Mhm.
I'm going to say that again. The people that can exercise their rights fully is because they have a level of privilege. And I say that because I've been on both sides of it. I've been the stay-at-home mom who was able to go to all the events and support my kid. And I've been the working mom
Right.
who's searching through her emails, trying to figure out something at the last minute because that's how much time I had to devote to it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so I can empathize with those people who don't know what's going on with their PTA
Mhm.
for one reason or another. Either because they have a demanding career, or they have some personal struggles, whatever. But I strongly believe in finding people wherever they are.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm proud to say, I think one of the things I was most happy about in my time at PTA is we greatly expanded our volunteer base. I had parents who weren't comfortable being on campus, but we did nice little things like them. I remember a parent who was like, I can work from home and help out. And she hand wrote cards to kids, thanking them for participating in Reflections program.
Yeah. By the way,
Yeah.
Debbie said it was bad moms. She said it was bad
Oh,
moms.
bad moms.
Yeah, just-
Thanks,
so you know.
Debbie.
Yeah. Sounds about right. I really admire, especially as of late, the voices from the PTA that have really put out the effort to get more and more involved, because it is very difficult.
Mhm.
I grew up with my mom wasn't very involved. She could have been, but I think there was that intimidation thing. Kind of you were saying, like she felt a little intimidated. But a lot of people just they're either single parent or they don't know how to be involved.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. Finding them where they're at, and then just making sure they have the opportunity to be involved if they can and choose to, is very important. What do you think is a challenge, and I'll just say our district specifically, of getting people more involved? And when it comes to meeting them where they're at, where do you see the people that have the hardest or the biggest barrier of being involved?
Okay, well, to the first part of the question, as far as like what's one of the challenges of being involved, I mean, you're going to face this anywhere. So I'll just speak in general terms first. But like you were saying, some people are intimidated to get involved, or they might not have the time to get involved. But let's face it, as you said, everything's a click. And as I mentioned before, you know, people see you always together and they assume you're friends, and they don't want to, it's really uncomfortable to broach that.
Well, nobody wants rejection, right?
Right.
So it's like a human thing of like you're shielding yourself from rejection.
Absolutely. And you put yourself in a very vulnerable spot when you're going to approach these people that seem to run the campus and that do everything and that you see all the time. There is sometimes this cliquish nature that everyone's susceptible to, and you have to constantly check yourself with to see, like, am I being inclusive? Am I making anyone feel excluded right now? Yeah,
because even if you don't think you are, and that's why I think feedback is very important. I got some feedback that I was totally I call it like at a blind spot. And I got some feedback from a good friend, Diane. She's actually the owner of a DNA salon here right down the street. And she had mentioned like the Chamber of Commerce. She's like, I wanted to be more involved, but it felt very cliquey. And I don't see it that way. But then I realized like it doesn't matter how I see it. Right? Because like that's not the point.
Exactly. What do you look like from the outside?
Right. It's important.
And what I really respect about you, Brad, that you even mentioned that. And here's why. Because you called it feedback. You know what a lot of people call it?
Criticism or judgment.
And when you call it criticism and when you call it judgment, you're automatically taking a negative stance on it.
Right. And it's defensive. I think that it's important. Feedback, being open to input, and, being having some humility can go a long way.
Absolutely.
Because it's not always about you. It's about the kids and being as, communicating to the extent of that it is supporting the goal and not injecting your own ego into the equation to just make it harder for everybody.
Yeah.
And, that's easier said than done, because we all have an ego and nobody's perfect. But like you said, it's important to just, acknowledge your blind spots and just step back and accept it. And if the shoe fits, and I would use the example, if you get feedback that what you get defensive about says more about you, how much you believe the actual feedback. And the more defensive you feel, the more you should look on it and meditate on it and soak it in.
I think that's a really insightful way to look at it. And I so appreciate that perspective that you have, because it's tough.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, when I never got around to how I got on the board.
I know.
Maybe that doesn't matter, but that's okay.
Yeah, strap in, folks.
But let me just say,
this is how it's
real
going to go.
fast. I know we're going to be here till tomorrow morning. No, I was not voted onto the board by the public, as most board members are.
Right.
What happened is there was a board member who was, he fell ill. rest in peace, Dr. Paul Helzer, and he had to leave the board in the middle of his term. Board members serve for a 4-year term, and there was a vacant spot on the board, which is problematic because the board is composed of 5 people. So when they vote, right, let's say they're very split on an issue, they vote 2-2. Well, that's going to create an issue. It takes a majority of the board to move anything forward, which is 3 folks. So they needed to fill that spot. And so the current board at the time, the board that was current at the time, had an appointment process, and candidates up from the community applied to be on the board, went to a public interview. It was like a panel style interview. It happened right in front of everybody. So, I mean, it was, on the one hand, it was very different because you don't have a chance to run a campaign or get to know people or whatever. But I can say, just having spent so much time in the district, I mean, I know a lot of folks, teachers, parents, whatever. And again, these are colleagues. I met these people through volunteering on the school sites. That's the capacity in which I know them. And so anyway, the board actually voted ultimately to appoint me to the position on the board to fill out the rest of Dr. Helzer's term, which ended up was about 17 months. Okay. I think I calculated the other day that I was on the board. So when you say I know a thing or two about the board, that's probably an accurate count. Yeah.
I think you know a lot. You have a wealth of knowledge.
Because I spent so many years on the other side of the dais, in the audience. Yeah. And then was on that spot. I would always tell people after meetings, they would say, oh, thank you for this, whatever. And I say, the most important seat is actually yours. Yep. And I really believe that way, because those, I mean, as a person up there, we have these big padded chairs. I always felt very uncomfortable with that. And this huge, padded, throne, if you will. It was uncomfortable for me. I found out that those padded stackable chairs were much more comfortable in so many ways. Yeah. But anyhow, I think back to your question about involvement. People need to know that their involvement makes a difference. Nobody likes to do something just to do it. Right. And if you're going to take an extra, even 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, whatever out of your day, you need to know that it's going to matter. So I would say that on the whole, people need to see that their engagement is moving the ball. Right. They need to see that their engagement's making a difference. Whether that's a difference to one child, to a classroom, to a school site, to a whole district. Right. And even if it's just their child initially. Right. Right. Most of us get involved because our specific child. Right. And then you quickly see, you know what? I don't think we're the only person fighting this fight.
So that's a quick story. So when my daughter was sick, I got heavily involved in the Ronald McDonald House, because they took such good care of us when we were living in the hospital with her. And, just going there every night and getting a warm meal and a place to sleep that was basically attached to the hospital, the same parking lot, basically. And for that year, it mattered so much. And it really opened my eyes to how important that was. And so I got involved with the Ronald McDonald House and doing charity. So I really got involved because of my daughter, but it opened my eyes to how many, because you're in there with a bunch of other families and you're seeing that you're not the only one going through this. And my wife and I made a commitment that once we got to the other side of what we were going through, once we all got to go home, that we would still stay involved and help. And we have, I think we could do more, but we've always made it a point to, we cook dinner, we cook lunch, we do that. And then every year, I usually sit on the planning commission for the Walk for Kids event, which is their largest fundraiser. I do it because keeping my daughter involved in something that's very important and impactful and positive is very important, but also going and because I know that my participation matters. I know where that money's going to go. I know that when I cook the meal there, I see them eating it. And I know how that feels to be on the receiving end. It's very important. That's kind of what brought me to running for a school board myself. It's important, I think, to have skin in the game, especially when you're going into a volunteer role, which the board really is. It's a lot of work for very little pay, but you have to have your heart in it. You have to be passionate. You have to be willing to work. And for me, everything I've done has always been for my daughter, and I'm always willing to bust my butt for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I admire that in you, Brad, because to go through an experience as difficult as you guys went through and to make it to the other side, first of all, I mean, I'm so grateful that you did, and I know you are, and you take that gratitude with you and you want to turn it into action, into purpose, and be like, you know what, I want other people to make it through too. I want other families just to feel as supported as I did. And I really admire that that's a position that you're coming from. And you're right. This, COVID situation really, really has tested us all in ways that we didn't even know were possible, right? And it has brought out the worst in people, and it's brought out the best in people. But one thing I think it's done across the board is it has shown people for who they are. Yeah. Because those jerks that try so hard not to be jerks, guess what? They can't anymore. Yeah. It's done. Yeah. We all know they're jerks now. Yeah. And the same for people who are kind and have a good heart, like I feel that you do. Their passion has been cranked up. Their motivation to help others has been cranked up. And rather than retreating and being, cranky, you're like, what can I do? This has been hard on me and my family. I'm sure it's hard on other people and their families too. And I want to be part of the solution. Right. And so I really applaud you from coming at the board for that angle. Thank you. Thank you. I think that there is an element of so I think taking ownership is very important. And I think that kind of comes from being a business owner for so long, of just no matter what situation or the buck stops with you. So you just got to go. You got to problem solve. You got to figure it out, be creative, be innovative, make it work. And I feel like that's really the times we're in, where it's we don't have the luxury or we can't just say, well, it sucks and we'll just write it out and we'll figure it out later. No, we gotta go. We gotta go. Yeah, it's on. This is game time. Yeah. There's and there is that saying, the more you what is it? The more you sweat in time of peace, the less you bleed in time of war. And I feel like, when things are okay, it's very important to keep that mentality and make sure, even, and this is relevant today as ever, even after this passes, and it will pass probably right after the election, okay, but let's have it in mind that when this happens again, let's just be prepared and not wait. I understand the different levels of government, different levels of guidance and things we can and can't do, but there are innovative solutions that we can approach, and there has to be communication, and there just has to be effort. Just publicly facing effort. Let people know your hands are on the wheel. Together.
Exactly.
That's a key, Brad, because in addition to communication, I really feel like this is such an important time to collaborate. Yep. Because as much as we're physically apart from one another, we have means, most of us, I'll say, to keep in touch, to reach out, to know where our strengths begin and end. And when we see ourselves struggling, to reach out and say, hey, I think you're pretty good at this. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? This is why I think it's so important in this time, because guess what? All school districts are faced with this same crisis. Yep. And the smart districts are out there asking other districts, what are you doing? Yep. What's working for you?
It goes back to what we're talking about, kicking the ego to the curb and taking feedback, not taking it personally or not being defensive, and just, learning from other people and just having some humility. Maybe people are doing it better than you. Maybe that's a great thing, because now you get to be better too. Yeah. By just collaborating.
Yeah. And I like to focus on what you said, a word kind of think when we first started this, you said something about relationships. And honestly, I really feel like that's what it's all about. you know, whether it's PTA, whether it's the district, whether it's parents with one another, whether it's business owners, communities, whatever, all this is about, it's a relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you know, from, you know, your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your kids, how would that work out if you weren't talking to them right now?
Right. Right. Well,
It
because
wouldn't.
assumptions are always a great way to move forward.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and you know what? Sometimes your kids are going to ask you questions you don't have the answer to. And
Yeah.
I get that
That's
as a
great.
parent, that's tough.
Yeah.
It's hard. But sometimes you have to have that vulnerability to say, you know what, sweetie? I don't have the answer on this.
Yeah.
But here's what I do know. I know
Yeah.
I'll always love you. I know I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you tell them what you do know.
Right.
Right. And you, if it's something they need an answer to, what do?
Yeah.
You go find it.
You ask Alexa. Right.
Right.
So I
well-
finally turned it off. Usually when I do that, it starts. And then everybody that's watching, when I say, Alexa,
It activates.
now they're all watch.
Oh yeah, I finally went that route,
such a
but with
troll.
a different business this summer,
Mhm.
and it's been fun. And I realize it's always listening, and it activates
Uh-huh.
when I say that buzzword.
Yeah.
That's ever present. That starts with a G.
Oh.
If I say it, my phone's going to go yes.
Oh, really?
Google.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. I don't need you right
Yeah,
now. Anyway, so I tried to replace it with the word noodle to trick it.
Right.
It didn't work.
No?
So if I say, okay, and then
Yeah.
the word, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it because my
Yeah.
phone will come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the devices in my home, same thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary,
It is.
but hilarious.
But I think, you know, hearing somebody, especially somebody who's very intelligent, saying, I don't know, it does two things. Number one, it makes you feel safe and confident that when they do give you an answer, they really do know, or like they're speaking. Because if somebody never says I don't know, well then you just, you know, you lose confidence that if they didn't know, they wouldn't tell you anyway. But it also, it opens up conversation even more to where you can field more. Because I mean, my kids are a little younger to where they're not really asking me any hardball questions just yet.
Mhm.
But in any capacity, I feel like it's a very powerful thing to just say, I don't know, and I'm going to find out, and I'm going to get back to you. And I think that doesn't happen a lot in general, but also like from different levels of governance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key. And it's tough. Look, everybody's under a lot of strain.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure right now. Hats off to Debbie because she's a leader right now. and I don't envy anybody who's in a leadership position right now because it's tough.
Right.
There's a lot that
so much to
you
consider.
don't have control over,
Right.
right? There's a framework in which you operate,
Right.
especially as a school board member. There's
So before, because I think I know where you're going with that.
Okay.
We actually took a few questions.
okay.
And we're going to play them because I think I think one of the questions actually touches on one of those topics. So
Great.
we'll kind of go. Jamie, can you bring up the first question?
Hi, my name is Marisa Perez, and I'm a member of the Cerritos College Board of Trustees. My question to Hannah would be, from an equity lens, what do you see are the greatest challenges and opportunities as it relates to distance learning in fall?
Did you catch that?
Yeah, I think it was about what are some of the challenges and opportunities regarding equity with the distance learning situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, geez, the challenges are numerous.
Right.
Okay, so what we do know is that even for a family who has great Wi-Fi, high parent involvement, adequate electronics, it's tough. Distance learning is hard. Parents don't feel equipped to really ensure that their kids are learning what they need to be learning at this time. There's connection challenges, there's bandwidth challenges, there's all of this, right? And this is for the most privileged, best equipped families, right?
Right.
So for students that are starting from a different spot, Maybe they have working parents who are essential workers who are out there every day, and now these kids are at home. There's no school for them to go to. There's no after school care. There's no daycare. There's no meeting with their friends. There's no, sometimes not even going out with grandma because grandma is compromised.
Right.
And you know, if your mom's, you know, working at AutoZone or something, interfacing with the public every day and coming home, you can't put grandma at risk. So you've got kids. So all of the things that may have disadvantaged a student before are disadvantaging them even more.
Right.
So, and then we have situations like, you know, with your daughter who needs some special services. How do you deliver that?
Right.
How do you deliver that? It's much different when you have, let's say you're a speech pathologist who works with 25 students at a school site. And the way that would normally work is you're in a classroom and these kids come to you for an hour or two a day. Well, now these 25 kids are in 25 different homes who you may or may not be able to contact.
Right.
Who may or may not be able to get a Zoom call thing working. And how effective is that anyway when you're working with speech?
Very.
You know what I'm saying? So those challenges that were already challenges are now more of a challenge.
Yeah.
But what about the opportunities there? So what I see is this is a great time for the community to coalesce and collaborate to see how can we fill those gaps.
Right.
So if you have, as a district, if you have strong community partnerships with, say, your Chamber of Commerce, and you've got a business out there that's like, you know what, I got this equipment I can't use right now. Can your district utilize it? Or maybe the district even approaches these people and says, you know, can you sponsor 500 hotspots at $30 a pop for our kids that don't have Wi-Fi at home? Right. Can you, I mean, just little things. You have to really get creative and you've got to reach out and there's got to be an ask.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the worst they can do is say no.
Right.
You know, and I mean, the federal government has made some additional funds available. And so is the state government to kind of like safeguard and protect certain things. And so as a district, like how do you optimize that to put it where it's most needed?
Right.
Right. So, so that's one of the opportunities there. I think another opportunity is that, since this situation has shown, kind of put everything in really sharp, contrasting light, right? Yeah. So teachers sometimes think about it, right? They're seeing inside kids' homes for the first time.
Yeah.
A lot of them, or not. There are a lot of kids that weren't showing up to like their Zoom calls or their distance learning, right? And so it kind of puts it's in a new light for teachers. Teachers know there's a challenge there. What is it?
Yeah.
Right. And so whereas it was different when you have a kid on camp, you might have that like, you know, quiet kid in your class that is trying really hard and you don't know what all he's struggling with at home.
Right.
And now all of a sudden he's disappeared off your radar. He's not participating. Why? Right. So it kind of like flags that, and I call that an opportunity because you can't address a problem if you don't know that it's there. Right. And so sometimes I think in these situations, those problems are being brought to light in a way that they can be addressed. And then that's where I think the other top opportunities come in. Okay, now we see these issues. How can we start working together? Right. Together to solve them.
But I think that goes to the point of educate better together when it comes to the parents have to be involved too, right? So it's not just kids are coming to class and then you teach and then they go home and then you repeat the next day. This is really a matter of seeing where the parents are at. How comfortable are they kind of picking up a little bit of the necessary slack? How comfortable are they with technology? How comfortable are they communicating what they need as far as supports from teachers and the district? You know, this is like you said, it's an opportunity to figure out how to create a more cohesive relationship between parents and their child's education supports. And I think there's, to that question of, there are inequities. I mean, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to child's nutrition, the digital divide of kids just not having access, I think that needs to be addressed, and I hope it does very fast, because that's going to be very important in the next couple months, making sure that we can get up and going with the distance learning for a lot of kids, because I'm sure some of the kids that didn't show up for classes, there's probably some limitations there that they had. And also, when it comes to inequities, some kids are living in 1-bedroom apartments where maybe getting on the laptop and maybe it's more of an issue. Maybe they have siblings running around. Maybe it's just more distracting. And honestly, with a parent, if you're doing distance learning and you don't see the value, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, if you don't see the value, it's very hard to stay disciplined to do it. If a parent sees the value, they're going to make it happen. I believe in. But if there were classes my daughter was taking that, I'm not saying the teacher was bad at all, but some teachers are going to be a little bit more trained and better, suited to be engaging over, there's an art there, being engaging, especially with students that have a hard time paying attention over a Zoom call. It's difficult.
Absolutely.
So if, for getting even my daughter, like, to do all those classes, there was some of them had very little value, and I think that there's room to grow. And that's where me being like media guy, I feel like there's a lot that could happen with the medium that can make it more effective for students.
For sure. And I mean, let's face it though, like, where you might be comfortable in this environment, I'm sure there are teachers that are really comfortable in the classroom environment and not in this environment, right?
Right.
To your point, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's a matter of what are those resources and how can we collaborate? Who knows? Maybe there's a way that teachers can work together, and there's a teacher who feels like, what, I got this tech thing down. Here's what I'm doing. Here's this stuff. And then likewise, teachers who need supports in those areas and want to get that training, it'd be great for them to have access to it. And I'm glad you brought up the parent piece, because that's really important.
Yeah. It's
always important for parents to be involved in their kids' education, but now we're at a point where we're actually relying on them.
Yeah.
It's really something that we're looking to parents to partner with teachers on these particular things. And again, it's going to be easier for some parents than it is for others.
Yeah.
I mean, I face that to some extent. I work full time and I travel for work. And when my kid, who's 15, was supposed to be in a Zoom meeting, I'm stressing out in the middle of my meeting. Is my kid on the Zoom? Like, I don't know. Can I trust that my child's making it to his Zoom call on time?
Right.
And that's me being half involved, I would say, because when I wasn't working full time, I feel like I was fully involved. You know what I mean? Yeah. But there are parents who can't really be involved that much. And that brings up another point.
Yeah.
People who don't speak English
as
their first language. Yeah. So if you feel like it's a struggle for you and you're comfortable with tech and you're comfortable with the language, imagine what the parents who speak a different language, that all this information's in a different language than they speak.
Yeah.
And I think to Marissa's question, the equity, that's part of it too.
Yeah.
Who's being left out of the conversation? Who's struggling more than other folks? Let's identify them, and then let's look for ways to help them. And in that whole thing of advocating for more than just your kid, let's advocate for more than just like you and me,
right? As
parents, how can we support these working parents, or our Spanish speaking parents, or, our deaf parents?
Yeah.
Our,
Yeah. I mean, identifying the problem and then figuring out creative and effective ways of solving them. Another thing is, I grew up in pretty rough area, like Section 8 housing, and there were a lot of single parent households. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, if I had a friend who like was sick or like didn't go to school, like, I mean, some kids, like, you couldn't leave them alone, at that, and you couldn't afford childcare. Mm-hmm. And there's a good chance if you do try to leave your kid home, he's probably going to get in trouble by the time you get home. Yep. So, like, there's a lot of like different issues. Every household has different challenges. There's no two identical cases. Yeah. And it's important to have, again, it all comes back to communication.
Yep.
Just like find out what we need to do, and then communicate about how we can make it better.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done, right?
Absolutely.
It's so, I mean, and
It's
again,
tough.
it's such a weird time. I don't say like that as like a judgment on anybody, because I think there are really good, competent people that are trying to do the right thing and trying to make this all work. And there's a lot of moving parts, and every other day there's like something new to consider, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but we need to use this as a huge learning moment, and how we can make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And if anything similar happens, we got that covered, and we know what to do, and it's effective, and there's data to show that it's effective, and here are some options in case it's not working for your learner. Here are some other ways, and get the parents involved in making that decision.
Yeah. And that's why I think collaboration is so important.
Yeah.
Because no one leader has all the answers.
Right.
No one board has all the answers. It's only by working together and pulling in those different levels of stakeholders that I feel like we have the greatest chance of even combating some of these challenges that we face.
Exactly.
If you want to talk about instruction and what's most effective, talk to your teachers.
Yeah.
Right? Why would you not?
Yeah.
So, these districts that are creating these like community task forces of all levels of staff and parents, I really feel like that's kind of the way to go right now. So you have those different expertise levels and those different voices all contributing to the conversation and helping problem solve this situation we didn't anticipate, and that's challenging for all of us.
Yep. And I had another comment. It says, and forcing all stakeholders in ed to catch up in regards to technology deficiencies. So to our points of, making sure those things happen, and funding, right? And making sure that we have a plan to fund those things that are going to close that equity gap and make sure that everybody is going to be able to succeed.
Absolutely. It does come at a cost, but I think that this is the time for creativity, collaboration, and communication, the 3 C's. Let's just put it at that.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, Jamie, I think we're ready for the next question.
Hi, Hannah and Brad. It's Allison from Allison Tutoring. I wanted to know, what are some things that people assume that the school board can help with, or maybe has the power to do, but really is in the hands of someone else? I think as a parent and a teacher, we're all a little bit confused as to the roles that maybe the superintendent plays versus the school board versus principal. So if you could clear that up a little bit for me, thank you.
I think the question was what does a school board actually have the power to do, and what's
Basically
outside of their realm of
what's
their call and what's not.
Okay.
Right now, people are really tuned into what is a board, what do they do, why, and why aren't you doing this?
Right.
So let's first just say, if Allison's question was related to issues around reopening distance learning versus hybrid versus on campus, that's not a call right now that school districts can make. Right now. So the chain of command in regards to that starts pretty high on a global scale. It's a World Health Organization. Then you're looking at the CDC, which is the United States Health Organization. Then there's the state of California. So governors make certain calls about what can and can't happen, where we are as a state in the crisis. Then each county is in a different spot. And so at the county level is the most direct oversight organization of the district, who says, here's where we are in relationship to COVID, meaning this is kind of where this is going to go. So if it's something not at a state level, it could be at the county level. But for right now, the decision has been made that in the state of California, instruction will remotely. Yeah. Not in person. Yeah. And the school board has no control over that. Right. They are there's a lot of guidelines that are put out for schools that need to be followed once schools do reopen. And a lot of districts are planning for that right now. What does personal protection equipment look like? How do you ensure social distancing, especially on the playground and in the lunchroom? And how do you do lunches?
Right.
You know, all these types of things. And there's a lot of factors involved in that districts have to look at. So now let's talk about districts in particular.
Right.
What is a district structure? What is it? How does it work?
Right.
You know, a lot of people don't know what a school board is, what it's supposed to do, how it functions, what they're responsible for.
Yeah.
Right. Until what? There's a problem.
Right.
Or the perception of a problem.
Yeah.
You know, that's all. Perception's reality for a lot
Yeah.
of people, right? So that's when people hear about this thing called school board.
Right.
And maybe they go to a meeting. That's what my experience was.
Yeah.
I was a PTA president, and I made it through almost the whole first year of my PTA presidency. And up to that point, I had never gone to a school board meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I pull up one day to the school and someone's handing out flyers. Go to the school board meeting tonight and protest, right?
Right.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
what? What are we protesting? What's happening?
Intense. Yeah.
You know, and that's where I learned, my little sights have been focused here on this campus. I
Yeah.
should probably,
You're like, well, I want to be on
Zoom.
the other side of this.
let me tune in a little bit. What's going on? Well, come to find out, the board was going to be voting on whether to close or limit ILC hours. I mentioned before it was an extended day program. It was
Right.
called the Intensive Learning Center because they were intensely learning. They weren't just learning, they were intensely learning.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
very rigorous.
Right.
That was a whole thing. You're in school from 8 to 4. You have an hour of homework for every grade that you're in. You know, so by the 6th grade, you have 6 hours of homework. You know, these are the parents these are the tiger moms. You know, we
Yeah.
got our kids there. You're going to learn. You're going to be smart.
Yeah.
Harvard is in your future, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they were going to be ending the extended year, getting rid of the 4 specialists that we had: technology, Spanish, science, and PE. And they were going to be laying off teachers. Some of them, the teachers that had been riffed, had been in the district for 8 years. They were deep cuts. Now, this is all happening in the context of state budget cuts, right?
Right.
So as kind of a little bit of a policy wonk and a nerd, you know, regular NPR listener, hope you can hear me, KPCC. Send me that tote bag. Anyway, I mean, I knew that stuff is going on. We're in a global financial crisis.
Yeah.
How can it not affect a publicly funded institution?
Right.
Right. So, I knew enough to know, okay, well, something's going on, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're going to show up at the district, what's our slant? What's
Right.
our purpose? What's our goal? Anyway. So I called the superintendent. I just went straight to the source.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, so what is this? What's going on? And he starts explaining to me the state is cutting education budgets and these are affecting the district, and then the district, if all the the funding for these special things at ILC are coming out of the general budget.
Mm-hmm.
And their general budget is shrinking, and we can no longer justify these additional funds being spent, and therefore, this is happening, whatever. So, okay. So, I kind of walk in with a little bit of a perspective of, all right, you're maybe making decisions that you feel like you have no other choice than to make.
Right.
Right. And so I didn't have a fork or
Pitchfork?
a pitchfork. I'm hungry,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
A pitchfork or
I
a
have
torch.
pizza in there for us when
Thanks.
we're done. Yeah.
But I was ready to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't upset
Right.
until, I feel like I can safely say this because this was back
Okay.
in 2010, long
Okay.
time ago.
Okay.
Until
10-year
a
rule.
board member said, you guys should know already. If you cared, you would be at our meetings.
Mhm.
Oh, that hit me wrong.
Yeah.
That hit a certain kind of
Yeah.
way. Because let me tell you, you know where parents are on a Thursday night at 7 p.m.?
Right. Right. Well, it's a good thing they live stream and record all their meetings so everybody's in the know, right? That's good.
Well, that's another,
I'm happy they do that.
a lot of districts do. And it's really interesting. Like
Yep.
if you ever wonder, I think, how are we compared to other places? I think this is a good gauge at any time.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it can go wrong, but
Yeah.
I guess what I'm
Yeah.
saying is like, well, just look at other similarly placed public institutions,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
If you're trying to gauge
It doesn't
if
hurt.
your city council is how they're working, how to,
Yeah.
well, go to a different city council meeting sometime.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's been valuable for me in my capacity at work is I get to go to a lot of board meetings. And so you start to kind of see what's the same and what's different.
Yeah.
And anyway, back to the point.
Yeah. So actually the question, so about, I think it's more what is the responsibility of the board, and
Yeah.
then where do decisions get made? And you're totally right. When it comes to COVID, we're in like this different kind of realm, and it's not really just about us as a district. It's about everything that's going on in the
Yeah.
world, country, state,
Yeah.
county, everything. But I think that, when it comes to like people protesting at the like a board meeting, it's the board really is oversight, right? The board
Yeah.
is the people
Yeah.
elected by the people to oversee what's going on in our district and to create vision with collaboration with the community. But their employee is obviously the superintendent, and that person and the district staff is going to execute decisions, and then the board will report back to the community, right?
Yeah.
But people, I think, often mistake like the board making decisions, and also individual board members when anything that gets done with the board is the entire board. It's a one thing. It's not
Correct.
one board member doing it. So that's why the group is really important, and that's why what you said earlier about like the split, like when it's like two, and then you have the third person, like when you came in, like it's really important to have a board that can work together, that can communicate. They don't all have to see eye to eye. In fact, it's good to have opposition and have that's how good solutions come in.
Absolutely.
But they at least need to mesh enough on a civil level to work together.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, and I think so. There's a number of things here, and I do want to kind of backfill a little bit because
Sure.
you have experience serving on boards, right? I have experience serving on boards, going to board meetings, but I'm just going to acknowledge that a large part of our community doesn't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's
It's easy to forget that sometimes, but
yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a few different points in there. So right now, a lot of people are upset at their boards and superintendents, not just in BUSD, but all around, right? Because there's a lack of understanding about who does what, who's responsible for what, who gets to decide what, or even if they do, like you're going to upset people for what you decide and how you roll it out.
It's like the saying, try to please everybody, and
you can't.
do.
And you know what? I was telling someone the other day, you're always going to have like 10% of people that hate you no matter what, 10% of people that love you no matter what, but you're really working to the middle.
Right.
When it comes to things like to pleasing people, I guess, so to speak. If you're getting a lot of feedback that you're doing it wrong, you should take that feedback and see what you can do with it.
It's important,
right?
Like,
But you're going to have, even in the best of times, there's going to be a couple people that always just think you're horrible, right? And they're just going to be, but anyway, we're not talking about those people, right?
Yeah.
If a lot of people, and even the moderate people in your community are like, hey, there's an issue. So I can tell you right now, so boards should not be the ones sitting down to come up with the fine granular details of a plan.
Right. Leave it to the specialists. Like that's what
that is where your staff comes in.
Right.
When it comes to budgetary type things, ideally you have a good, strong.
You need the right people in the right positions.
Yes.
That's what you need. The board is not going to go in and do every single job.
Yes.
It's oversight, it's vision, it's collaboration with the community, and like that's how that needs to happen.
So they kind of like set the direction. They make sure that path is being followed. But the key thing is there that link between the staff's ears and the public's mouth.
Exactly. And that's why communication is so important, and transparency, and just and again, like that's where like people need to feel not only welcome in that conversation, but encouraged in that conversation. And the barriers of being involved need to be broken down. And that includes just access to information from meetings, but also, reaching out to we have a lot of parents where English isn't their first language. What are we doing to get them involved and create some access to the information from what's happening at the board meetings, because it's important.
Right. And I was going to say earlier, the reason people don't go to board meetings is because they're so involved in their own kids' lives.
Yeah.
You're okay. Let me just tell you, when you're a parent, you are actually a taxi driver. And for those that you don't know, that's what happened before Uber and Lyft. They were called taxis, and they drove people around everywhere. That's what you're doing. Yeah. Your kid's going to ballet and karate and choir and like all these things that you have your kids in. For you to go to a school board meeting, would you go if what you saw was just a board say, pass the consent agenda? Aye. Okay, dismiss. Yeah. No. Nope. Or if you go and you get insulted by board members, you want to, well, you might go, but you're going to go. I know, right? So to take a night away from your family that you're heavily invested in, to go sit at a crusty board meeting, you have to edit that out later.
I'm not editing crusty ass.
It means there's got to be something important or meaningful happening, right? Unfortunately, usually that's a negative situation. Or what you'll find as a board member, I'm going to be positive here. Okay. Is some of the most awesome board meetings to go to are the ones where your kids are being celebrated for their accomplishments. Right. I love those, right? When we're like, these kids made it to nationals in this. Right. And these kids just won the CIF championship and you're celebrating them. Right. And it's phenomenal.
But that's where culture comes in. That's where like creating an atmosphere of celebration, of positive energy and just a more positive culture, a more inclusive way of governing where you're really celebrating the process and inclusion. So that I think is a huge component that some boards miss out on, which I think is a very powerful thing. But then, also like sometimes, depending on how board meetings are run, like, getting more information from staff and like having more reporting out and asking good questions that maybe the community would like to know. That's important too, because sometimes, that communication doesn't flow as easily from one end of governance to the other. And it's important to ask questions and just, because, sometimes you might have a perspective of some decisions like you were mentioning earlier, but then when you hear like, how those decisions are being made or why those difficult decisions are being made, it helps you understand that it's not that there's a lot of things involved and as long as you have the right people in the right roles, when you learn about all of the workings of certain decisions, you at least can you may not like the decision, you may not agree with it, you may still just feel the same, but at least you understand that there was a thought process and that it's important. I always use the rational actor kind of theory where I always think like I always like when decisions are being made, like somebody had to have thought this through and come to that conclusion. So I'm always interested in like that conversation of how it got there. I never jump to like, oh, you're being mean or you're bad, I
also admire that about you, Brad, because sometimes just knowing the process is very helpful.
Well, that's why I love so you do, you're doing it right now, but you have so much knowledge and you're very good at explaining it and sharing it. I know, Debbie is as well, Marisa Perez, all of the people that contribute to the, you're in the BUSD families Facebook group. Yeah. So like all of the information sharing that's happening there, that's so important. Like when you understand what's going on and even, people that are sharing, the Zoom calls that have been happening, but also like articles, from the state and different county guidelines, like it makes parents feel safer and more confident in their district when when you get that information, you know that there's things happening
Right.
and that there's people with their eyes on the road. Like, it makes you feel just better.
Yeah. And I think honestly, it goes back to that, what you talked about. We talked about relationship and trust,
Right.
right? If you have built these relationships with people and they can trust you and you respect them and all these types of things that just go into just a basic human relationship, if that's happening all over your district on a macro scale, between your board and your community members, between your superintendent and employees and your superintendent and families and community members, like that all builds trust, that builds relationships, so that, you know, yes, you still hold them accountable, but you
Right.
know that you can believe their word. And the worst thing I think that people can do right now in a time of high uncertainty, we're
Yeah.
all in a time of uncertainty in so
Yeah.
many levels.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. There's going to be a lot of answers that nobody has.
Right.
Right. But when you tell them what you do know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you're talking with them and you're letting them know, this is our process. Okay. We've got these people working on this. We've got these people working on that. These people are working with those. We invite you to take this survey to share your experiences with us. This is a big conversation. We're all trying to work on this together. Just share your process,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that is comforting for people,
It
for
is.
especially rational actors like you that just want to know, okay, you can't tell me all the nitty gritty over here,
Yeah.
but what's the process to getting to that point?
Right.
What we see in education is one of the most personal things,
Yeah.
right? These are people's children.
Yeah.
You love your kids more than anything, and you're handing them off.
Yeah. And then right now you have a lot of parents that are sitting there going, they're so even for me, you know, watching, you know, Tori's progress, kind of, it's diminishing. So she has a lot of social, issues when it comes to just communicating with other kids her age. Like, you know, playtime is very important. Like for her, like she's learning how to, she has some communication barriers. So, a lot of like the positive habits that she was creating, a lot of the positive, kind of, techniques she was starting to employ, like they're leaving, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Right. And I know for me, it's frustrating. And I don't think it's anybody's fault. It's like, we're all just in this crazy thing. Right. But it's sad because you're seeing that Zoom calls aren't necessarily working as good as we would hope they would. But the more you hear that, you know, the more you're updated on what's going on, and at least like being reinforced, like, you know, why we're not doing certain things, it really does help.
Yeah.
And it just makes you feel, just gives you a little bit of ease, a little bit of comfort. It doesn't fix the problem, but at least it helps the parents, and that's important.
There right now is just, you know, that empathy piece.
Yeah.
And just that understanding of, you know, that people are struggling and in a lot of different ways. In some ways we don't know and can never understand.
Yeah.
You know, and so I believe in being, extending grace, I guess, to people. Like I'm not the first person out there to, you know, finger wag, or you should
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Neither am I.
You know, and I get that from you as well. Like you, as you said, you're more of the rational actor, and you just kind of want to know what is the process. And I think the worst thing right now is radio silence, when you're hearing nothing
That's the
from
thing.
the
It's
folks
just,
that you're relying on. Can you imagine right now with all this stuff going on, if you weren't talking to your kids?
right.
Can you imagine how scared they might be that we're not leaving the house, we're not doing these things we normally do, I'm not going to school, I'm not. And that's how sometimes it can feel as maybe a community member when you're not hearing from your leaders as regularly as you would like to. So anyhow.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have one more question, and then let's go and roll tape.
How you guys doing today? Name is Duke Givens, and I have a son that has special needs. He has global developmental delays, and my question is this: what services do you provide that can assist him to have him reach his fullest potential? Look forward to this answer. Thank you.
Mr. Givens, I really appreciate his question, and I will just say that I don't speak on behalf of Bellflower Unified and
Right.
and or the current board. You know, I actually just recently moved out of the area, but it's a real question and a real concern, even that you were mentioning with Tori, right? That
So his son and my daughter actually had classmates at ILC.
okay,
yeah, and he's really involved in the community, and he's, you know, I think he really represents a big chunk of parents out there that are just, you're really concerned about their kids that have IEPs that, you know, are going to need these extra services. And you know, again, I don't speak on behalf of anybody. I know you don't either. And it's just really just a conversation. But I think that's important. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Okay. So a few things I would say, just to provide some direct, you know, guidance or something, and not leave Mr. Givens hanging out there.
Right.
Definitely check in with your child's principal, whoever that was. If you're not sure who that is, if you probably contacted whatever the teacher was that you last had. I know it's summertime, and I'm sorry, teachers. I'm not trying to throw this on you, and it's tough. But whatever faculty that you have contact information for,
It's Miss Sarita.
okay.
Yeah.
Definitely reach out and kind of, you know, pose that question, and then you might need to kick it up the chain a little bit. I mean, recognizing that she's probably under a big load, and, you know, it could fall through the cracks here or there, whatever. You know, so I would definitely say, you know, reach out to the superintendent, who can point you in the right direction to whoever administers or oversees special education services at this time. So I don't want to leave him hanging. I want to give him something right there. But I think to the broader issue of people who are kind of finding themselves in this boat, let me just talk. Districts, it's tough right now to figure out how to administer services. And I think even if there's a will, there are challenges to the ways. Right. And that's where I think I'm really a firm believer in networking and coordinating with other districts. This is not a time to be like, oh, I'm worried you're doing it better than me. This is not a time competing for students, because ADA, average daily attendance, or enrollment numbers for students are down kind of across the board due to a number of factors. Enrollment, people moving, or demographic shifts,
so there's a little bit of
et cetera.
So there's competitive nature.
Sometimes that can creep in to a district's ethos. I don't want to wax too philosophical here. I feel like I'm doing that. Trying to be careful.
It's really hard to not sound philosophical when you say ethos. Like, that's like, you know, every once in a while when I try to not be philosophical, I bring up stuff Aristotle says.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let me.
So
just...
no, I get the. So I used to have that problem with a much smaller scale, but so I owned a gym for 10 years, and I never, like, whenever I would, and I also was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, so I would try to help all businesses while still having my own. And there was always this like distrust of like, oh, you know, you own a gym and you want to take everybody for yourself. And I never saw it that way. I never did. I mean, maybe the first year, maybe a little bit, but once you realize that like the better ideas and better execution prevails, you know, that's what you focus on, and people will come, and people will choose the best, you know, products out there, and to be so competitive where you actually, you know, isolate yourself, that can be very difficult.
I think that's where it comes in, where if you view a school district as a business, you're already starting on the wrong foot. It's not. Yes, you have to operate within certain budgetary realities, but at the end of the day, what you're concerned about is not your profit margin or your bottom line. You're concerned about your effectiveness with developing the next generation of leaders.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, for like the business mindset would be competitive for trying to get each student and not let them go to other districts.
You know, it's tough. I will say that it is tough. It's tough because when ultimately a school district is funded by kind of enrollment, and then the type of enrollment that you have. So when you see your enrollment declining, you know, you see your dollars declining, and certain you're going to have less students that you have to spend money on. But if you think about it, there are certain expenses that, regardless of how many kids you have they're going to stay level.
Right.
Facilities maintenance is one of them.
Right.
You know, electricity, just these basic things, right? That these costs are flatlined, right? But if these are your expenses are here, and then if your variable is how much funding you're getting in, then you're having to do more with less. So I understand that, right? But if you're gauging yourself not at the end of the day, you know, how much are we saving here that we can put into reserve for a rainy day, or how much can we shave off of here because this is cheaper. This soap is cheaper than this soap. If you're gauging your success differently, if you're gauging it on, you know, how engaged are your parents? How are your students achieving? How are you closing that achievement gap? How are you reaching those students who have some equity challenges? How are you improving the lives of students who rely on special services? If those are your measures, and you don't look at schools as a business, I think that causes you to be more collaborative by nature than competitive. Right. Because you're not looking at a kid as a dollar sign. Right. You're looking at it as a human being. Right. And I honestly think that's one of the most unique things about board meetings, about education, because you have a ton of adults doing things on behalf of children. And you know what voice is not usually at a board meeting in a meaningful way? The students. Right. So a lot of times we're doing things to our kids, for our kids, but not with them. And I know we have at board meetings, there's pre-COVID, we have student representatives who come and they give their reports to the board. It's a standard part of the meeting. Usually their reports are... Is there like a student senate for the district? There's not, but there needs to be. Okay. That'd be pretty... first order of business. Yeah, I think one of the things that I did as a board member... Get those things live streamed. One of the things that I did as a board member is I went and talked to the Mayfair Debate Club. Okay. Because we, as a board, there was a particular policy that was a bit contentious at the time. It had to do with enrollment and how it affected kids at the beginning of the year whenever the district reorganized classes. And it ultimately came down to a certain question, right? Mm-hmm. That if you have to reorganize students, should it be done this way or that way? And it was a policy thing that we as a board could have enacted. So I took it before the Mayfair Debate Club, right? These are students, right? So I kind of explained what the board is and that they, you know, sign off on policy, right? Because that's what a board does. Little secret, we don't actually craft the policy. We can customize it, but we get a lot of templates from the California School Board Association. Right. They'll have policies available and you can activate a policy, deactivate it, you can tweak it a little, whatever. But anyway, so I posed this question to them. And first of all, I had to take an hour explaining what the school board is, what they do, how it works and everything. Because there's not a lot of general knowledge out in the community, and you know, local government isn't particularly exciting to students anyway, but these kids were fully engaged and I had a survey for them, you know, to ask about these things, and they gave their input, and I really appreciated that experience as a board member, because, and they did too. Yeah. A lot of these students thanked me for that time. I also reached out to when the high school newspaper, the Windjammer at Mayfair, and I was like, hey, come to our school board meetings. Cover them. Right. You know, be there. And again, though, are you gonna set homework aside and come to a school board meeting if it's not particularly meaningful or engaging to you? And that's where I think that piece came in, where you said sometimes as a board member, if you might already know the answer to something, but if you ask a question of staff in public session so that the community knows the answer, sometimes it's a really powerful tool. And another, I think, underutilized tool for boards in general is study sessions. Yeah. And that's an opportunity for the board and staff to kind of all get in the same room. Well, right now, all the same Zoom. Yeah. And you know, they can ask questions of staff, and staff can provide answers, and they can brainstorm and they can think, and there's no decisions being made. Yeah. It's a discussion. It's a discovery session. Right. Yeah. And it's something that's open to the public as well. Yeah. Just like a public meeting is. And it's such a valuable tool. And I think that it's underutilized a lot by public agencies, Bellflower included. to really just examine something, get a lot of input from the community, from various levels of stakeholders.
And that's exactly how you increase positive culture too. When you have those back and forth, those conversations, makes staff, and it makes them more confident that the board knows what's going on and is more engaged, and that's going to help morale and culture. And then also when you're reporting out to the community, it helps that trust, and so they are more in the know. And then to your point of students being more involved and encouraging that, that's another great way to get parents more involved, is by getting students involved, because they go home with that knowledge and with that perspective of what's going on the board and in their district.
For sure. And it really helps people to understand I like for the community not to have things happen to them, but happen with them.
Right. That's what it should be.
And helping them, kind of understand and navigate that. And another thing that I did as a board member that I really appreciated is I got to spend a day with our student rep from Somerset, which is our alternative education continuation high school. And I just, to just walk a day in his shoes, right? And I asked him at the conclusion of that day, I said, will you do me a favor? Check with your principal, make sure it's okay. But at the next board meeting, instead of coming to tell us about all the events that you had, because that's usually what the student report is like. Yeah. We had this, event, this event, and this event, and this event. And it's cute and it's nice and it's a good kind of connection. But I said, do me this favor if you can. Answer me 3 questions. What makes you want to go to school in the morning? What has helped you the most as a student? And what can we do better? And I think I got a little bit of assistance from his principal, because his next report out, he started to talk about those things a little bit. Yeah. And to me, that was one of the most meaningful student reports that I ever heard.
That's awesome.
Because if you want to know if you're hitting the mark, you talked about culture. Mm-hmm. Did you know that an improvement in culture at the board level has the ability to raise student achievement by 10 percentage points? That is something studied out that so empowering to me when I went to school board convention in 2017 and heard the speaker, Steve Lamb, talking about it. To know that these people that seem so irrelevant and far removed from your life, but if they're providing the proper cultural facilitation, they're demanding that of their staff. And when I say staff, I'm talking about district staff. I'm not talking about teachers. Right. Because what happens at that level affects how your teachers and your staff, your classified employees feel every day when they walk on campus. Are they excited to be there? Do they know that their input is valued?
Do they feel respected?
Do they feel respected?
A part of the process?
Exactly. And when they do, the difference that they make in kids' life is tenfold. Yeah. Because they don't have to worry about all these fights that they have with administration and district office and whatever. You're going to have enough fight with students and parents, okay? Right. You don't need a fight over here. Right. When you're able to work together, the amazing thing that does for your parent engagement, for your student, just when a teacher feels good about their position, that kid is going to feel better about being there. Do you know what I mean? Yep. And being able to take on that accountability, to know that they are now the we. Right. We work with our district. We're all working together. We're all on this. I mean, it's amazing and it's powerful. I think that's where we need to go, and we need to educate better together. And we're looking to you to be a part of that.
I'm humbled by the things you say. I'm humbled by the amount of passion and amount of energy that parents and teachers have had in these conversations I've had. I'm pretty fired up. Awesome. Like I'm not only fired up to have more of those conversations and learn as much as I can, but really bring what I have to the table. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be really good. And then with Myra is running as well.
Yeah.
And
So excited about that, by the way.
Me too.
I mean,
think she's going to be amazing.
Having someone, I'll just talk about Myra.
Sure.
I had the pleasure to get to know her back in, when I was on the board. Had dinner a couple times, some conversations, and with her family, and what
Her husband's amazing too. Juan Garza.
Thank you.
Love that guy.
Yes, I really, really do.
Mayor Garza.
Yes, Mayor Garza is someone that I can honestly say that I respect.
Yes.
The level of communication, dedication, all that is an authenticity, and accountability, and giving credit to his staff. I've just been so impressed.
Mm-hmm. He's the type of guy you talk to and he'll say something, and then there's something that he says that you're still thinking about 2 hours later. That happened to me not too long ago, and I couldn't get out of my head. And I think that's he's a powerful communicator, and I think that's so important. And I think Myra has that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was going to say. It was in kind of like talking with Juan that I got to know Myra as well. And, oftentimes, and Mandy probably knows this, like when you're the partner of someone who's in a public leadership position,
Mm-hmm.
you can often be kind of overshadowed a little bit. But
I get overshadowed by her. Are you kidding me? Everybody loves her. She's
and they should. I met her and she's lovely.
The only time I'm getting likes on my Facebook post is if it's a picture of her.
But the level of, instructional leadership
Mm-hmm.
and dedication, compassion that Myra always exhibited and would talk to me came through just so clearly and so evidently in my conversations with her. And, someone who observes before judging. I think that's really important, but who's willing to be a part of the solution, right?
Yes.
And just like you. And so I'm really hopeful, honestly, about the both of you being on the board. And I will just say out there to the community, just keep in mind, you're going to have these two fabulous people on the board. They're going to need a cohort.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, I'm not to denigrate anyone who's currently on the board. We're losing Debbie, and that bothers me because Debbie's a firecracker and she's always been a warrior for the people.
Yeah,
right?
Debbie's awesome.
Yeah, and I appreciate that about her, and she's been one of my, we grew up in PTA together essentially. Yeah. And so I appreciate the what she brings, and but she's passing the mantle, right? And now I'm hopeful that that things are going to move in a positive direction under your leadership and Myra's leadership. And you're going to need that magic number 3, that's a board majority, to vote on things, to make sure that policies are reviewed, and to provide that level of oversight that the community and communication that the community is relying on. So, if you get to a point where you're hitting that brick wall, I think that's where the community comes in, right? Mm-hmm. and can be there and show up, and not that they're not already, and I think that they are to a great extent. And I would just encourage you to, as my kids say, keep that same energy. That campaign energy that we see from leaders when they're out there to win a campaign, when they keep that during governance, that's the sweet spot. Keep listening, keep talking, and never turn that off.
Yep.
As a board member, there are certain things
I've tried. I can't.
I know, right? No, I really appreciate it. And this is evidence of that yourself. I mean, having a podcast, and having gabbers on like me who are way past their time, just speaks to your
well, to your point of moving in the right direction, and Debbie getting off the board, which I think is a big loss to the board. I think it's important to voices in the community really being heard is a very important thing. And I think voices like yours, like Debbie, and like, many others that have, a student's first mindset, I think those voices will continue to be heard. And I think that those voices in the community will grow as communication increases. And I'm very optimistic about the future of the amount of engagement that we can really do. I mean, because that's what I've really done with the chamber, and with using technology and media of communicating and then bringing people to the table. I think there's power in that. I think it's empowering, and I think we're going to go in the right direction, and I'm really excited that Myra's running as well, and we're running very cooperatively. This campaign, and my hope is that we can both get on there, so we get 2 people, and I know there's going to be that third and probably a fourth and a fifth by the time we all get together and really start getting to know each other. That we can really make some change and stay on top of the ball and make sure that whatever happens over the next year and beyond, that we're going to have a solid board that's going to be receptive, that's going to be accepting of input, and be able to make solid decisions for a long time forward. So I'm very excited about that.
For sure. And I'm hopeful as well. And I really think that you're going to have all the ingredients there to be successful and to bring the community along in those discussions. And
then also, I'm going to pick your brain more.
Okay.
We won't have to do it now because I know it's getting late, and we'll wrap up. I think my memory cards are almost full. But also, I think that there's a huge element of, advocating, even above the district, like when you would go to Sacramento, and encouraging more participation from other capacities to do the same.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I want to say, and I don't want to fail to say it, and I think the community needs to hear this too, for whoever's listening. It's so important for the board to be trained to do their job well. Yes. And that training is offered through the California State Board Association, CSBA. We use acronyms so much we sometimes forget what they mean. But no one's born knowing how to be a school board member. And you can do a lot of research.
You see that book? That's a huge
education
book.
code. I like that.
Man.
There's a piece of education code that came to my awareness that I had explicitly been taught something different.
Yeah.
And that's
knowledge is power, man. The more you know.
I had always heard that the superintendent was the board's only employee.
Yeah.
Well, yes and no, because here's the thing. Any assistant or associate superintendent is supposed to be under contract, and those contracts are approved by the board.
Right.
Can be terminated by the board. There's timelines and stuff involved and stuff like that. But it's in ed code.
Right.
You can Google it.
Yeah.
And I was like,
knowing
really?
That,
what? Yeah, I had always heard something.
But verify, right?
Yeah, I had always heard something very explicitly different. So, so that level, and I learned that. at training.
Right.
I learned that at training.
I will take full advantage of any training that they
absolutely
offer.
And then and you don't want 5 carbon copies of one another, right? You and Myra both bring different skills to the table, but your skills can complement one another.
Right.
And Renita has skills, and Richard has skills, and Laura has skills.
Yeah.
And it's all about like how do we utilize our skills but utilize them together.
Right.
And so that's training. And guess what? Even if you've been on a board for a long time, I still think training is great.
Yeah.
You know why? That book, that education code changes every once in a while.
Yeah.
Guidance changes every once in a while. Other stuff changes. And even if you've been on the board for 10 years, probably a good, even better to go to some recent training to learn what those changes are.
Especially important when you have new board members. I think I love self-development and continuing education. Like, I really like that. Actually, me and Eric did the same Hey, Eric, didn't we do the same self-development course? We did. I love it. But also whether it's ed code or things like the Brown Act, like the more you understand, what is the proper way of doing things, you have to know that in order to make the right decisions. And I think that being well versed in that is going to serve everybody.
Absolutely. Too. And I just want to say one other thing. I keep saying that.
I doubt it.
Right? You liar.
My money's on four things.
Okay. All right. But you said something about advocating at a higher level. I want to circle back to that SELPA trip that I took. Okay. So what ended up happening is we ended up in some legislators' offices, right? And I remember specifically one that we were talking to, Bonnie Lowenthal. She represents like part of Long Beach.
Related to
Alan Lowenthal. Is his wife, but she also is in government.
Okay.
And we went to her office, and she goes, "You've got 30 seconds, go."
Ooh.
Oh my gosh. So these parents are like, so I started speaking up, and she goes, "Do you have a child with special needs?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "I don't want to hear from you. Next."
Oh, wow.
And I'll tell you what I learned that day. A couple things. One, legislators did not want to hear from school board members. You know who they wanted to hear from? Parents. Because as a parent, you're going in caring about your kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was sent. Why? Because I cared about the budget.
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying I don't care about kids, but that's the angle that I went there with.
Right.
You're not giving us enough money. It's affecting all of our students. And all that's true. But you know what was more relevant to them? Okay. Was how is this directly affecting your child?
Right.
So that's just a small example of, once you get on the school board, you're automatically going to be seen in a different light to some extent. You have these experiences that you had as a parent, and that's always going to be more powerful, I think, in that specific regard, especially. That's important. And I say that to say, these parents, if you are ever in a position where you feel like you have begged and pleaded with your local entity, whether it's a school board or city council or whatever, and you're getting nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
kick it higher.
Yeah.
Kick it higher. Explain how it's affecting you directly. And if it's something specific, if they're able to hone in, well, hey, guess what? Everybody's in the spot right now.
Right.
Yes, I know. It's tough.
Yeah.
But if it's something that where they can hone in on, something's off here.
Right.
Then sometimes relief can come from those higher places.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to tackle.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
I'm so glad we did this.
Yes, me too.
So
Thank you
glad.
so much for inviting me on.
I really appreciate it.
And I appreciate those people who hung on.
Yeah.
Waited through tech difficulties.
I know. I was late, but we made it through.
We know
made it
what?
through.
I
got pizza though.
All right.
I got pizza in there.
And can we
So,
just acknowledge during the age of COVID, a lot of expectations have just gone.
Yeah. I just say
time?
COVID.
COVID,
And then,
right?
yeah.
It's the excuse for right now.
Yeah.
Don't know how much longer this
Yeah.
can work, but
I should instead I used the whole my power went out yesterday.
Mm.
It's like come on. Say COVID.
Snap.
COVID, move on.
all
Guys,
right.
well, thank you guys so much for sticking around, and a lot of conversations going forward. We might even have to do this, over the next couple months.
Sure.
I think we'll get some more questions. If you have more questions for Hannah or things that we talked about that you want us to talk a little bit more about, let us know in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. Be
Thank you,
safe, be
guys.
well, educate better together.
All right.
I think I'm going to
let's do
stick
it.
with that one. Educate
All right.
better together. I like it. All right, guys. Take
Okay.
care. Have a
We'll
good
see ya.
night.
Good
Bye.
night.
Awesome.